The air in the room is thick, heavy with the scent of old money and lilies. Dust motes dance in the single shaft of sunlight slicing through the grand bay window, illuminating the tense lines on faces I barely recognize as family. My hands are clasped so tightly in my lap, my knuckles ache white. Across the polished mahogany table, she sits, perfectly composed in black designer silk, a smirk playing on her lips, sharp and cruel like broken glass. Our parents, or rather, their absence, fills the space more profoundly than any of the antique furniture. They are gone, and what remains are us, circling like vultures around the remnants of their lives, codified into words on paper. The lawyer, a man as dry and brittle as old parchment, clears his throat. He holds the document, the final declaration, the thing that will define futures. Every eye is on him, but mine keep drifting to her. My sister. She catches my gaze, and the smirk deepens, twisting into something truly venomous. She leans forward, just slightly, her voice a low, sibilant whisper that cuts through the silence, meant only for me, yet loud enough in the charged air to feel like a shout. You were always the charity case. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. My life, before the quiet, inevitable slide towards this room, was built on different ground. It wasn't the manicured lawns and soaring ceilings of the estate where I occasionally visited, always feeling slightly out of place, like a stray cat invited in for a meal but never truly belonging. Mine was a smaller world, practical, earned. I lived in a city apartment, worked a job that paid the bills but offered little in the way of glamour or status. It was a life I built myself, brick by careful brick, often with far less mortar than others seemed to have. My parents were present, yes, but from a distance. Their love felt conditional, or perhaps just quieter, less effusive than the torrent of affection, gifts, and opportunities showered upon my sister. She was the golden child, effortlessly brilliant, beautiful, charismatic. Everything came easy to her, or so it seemed from my vantage point down below. While I navigated student loans and bus routes, she jetted off to exclusive universities, interned at prestigious firms recommended by Dad's contacts, and always had a safety net woven from silk and generational wealth. My desires were simple: stability, independence, maybe someday a small patch of earth I could call my own without feeling like I was borrowing it. I didn't dream of mansions or yachts. I dreamed of peace, of building something sturdy and real. My relationship with my sister was a constant, low-grade ache. It wasn't open warfare, not usually. More like a subtle, persistent competition I didn't even know I was entered into until I'd already lost. Her victories were my failures, not because I begrudged her success, but because she framed them that way. Every achievement of hers was highlighted against my comparatively humble existence. "Oh, you're still in that tiny place," she'd ask, not with curiosity, but with pity that tasted suspiciously like triumph. "Didn't Dad offer to help you out?" Oh, wait. A knowing look, a shared glance with Mom or Dad that made me feel like a problem they'd politely tolerated. I loved my parents in my own way. They provided for me, of course, ensured I had an education, a roof over my head when I needed it. But there was always a distance, a sense that I didn't quite fit into the grand tapestry of their lives in the way my sister did. I was the practical child, the one who would be fine, the one who didn't need the same level of focus or investment. The disruption came not with a bang, but with a hushed phone call on a gray Tuesday morning. Both of them.
À Soudaine, attaque un câble accident.
Gone just like that. The world tilted on its axis, not in a dramatic crash, but a slow, sickening lurch. Grief arrived, a cold, heavy cloak, but it was complicated, tangled with years of unspoken feelings, with the strange, distant nature of our relationship. And underneath the grief, almost immediately, came the logistical nightmare and the sharp, unavoidable reality of the estate. That's when the dynamic shifted, solidifying into something harder, colder. My sister, even in mourning, seemed to step into a new role, one she was born for. The inheritor, the matriarch in waiting, the one who would naturally assume control. The immediate aftermath of their deaths was a blur of condolences, funeral arrangements, and the suffocating politeness of distant relatives. Amidst the chaos, my sister began to subtly, almost imperceptibly, assert her claim. It wasn't about grief for her. Not primarily, it seemed. It was about legacy, about control. She moved into the estate house almost immediately, taking charge of sorting through their belongings, making decisions about the services, handling the endless stream of calls. I stayed in my small apartment, feeling adrift, unsure where I fit in this new landscape of loss and looming inheritance. When I visited the estate, it felt different. Her presence was everywhere, a subtle declaration of ownership. She started referring to our plans for the house, for the future of the estate, always using "our" in a way that implied she was the senior partner, the one in charge, and I was an afterthought, perhaps to be consulted on minor details, maybe. Her condescension, always present, took on a new edge. Now, it was laced with pity for my anticipated lack of inheritance. "It's going to be a lot to manage," she'd sigh, gesturing vaguely around the sprawling property. "I worry about how you'll cope, with everything." Everything meant, of course, your modest life versus the vast wealth she was certain was coming her way. She'd talk about her plans to renovate the East Wing, to update the gardens, to host charity galas in the ballroom. Never once did she ask for my input, not really. It was all presentation, solidifying her position, reminding everyone, including me, that she was the heir apparent, the deserving one. I felt a quiet despair settling in. It wasn't just the money, though the prospect of genuine financial security was appealing after years of scraping by. It was the confirmation of everything I'd always suspected, that I was second best, the afterthought, the one who would receive a token, if anything, while she inherited the kingdom. The estate wasn't just property, it was a symbol of their love, their approval, their validation. And it was clear who held the winning ticket. The subtle jabs escalated into more overt maneuvers. She started having things moved, pieces of furniture, artwork, even my mother's jewelry box, things she claimed Mom had always wanted her to have. There was no proof, just her assertion, delivered with a smile that dared me to challenge her. She talked openly to cousins and aunts about how the estate would need careful management, a steady hand, implying mine was anything but. There were whispers, originating from her circle, about my perceived irresponsibility in the past, small mistakes magnified into character flaws that, presumably, made me unfit for handling significant wealth. She was systematically dismantling my standing, poisoning the well of family opinion before the will was even read. I felt a deep, cold anger begin to simmer beneath my skin. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about the calculated cruelty of her actions, the way she used grief as a shield while she waged her little war of attrition. I tried to talk to her, to appeal to some sense of shared loss, shared history. It was useless. She saw only competition, only territory to be claimed. "Don't worry," she'd say patronizingly, patting my hand with a cool, detached touch. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. Maybe we can set up a small trust fund for you. Enough for expenses." The implication hung heavy in the air. Enough for my meager, inadequate life. One rainy afternoon, seeking refuge from the suffocating atmosphere of the main house, I wandered into my father's study. It was untouched, smelling of pipe tobacco and old paper. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a quiet corner to breathe. My gaze fell upon a small, locked drawer in his desk. I'd never seen it open. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable impulse, I searched for a key. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard near the window, I found a small, tarnished silver key. It fit. Inside the drawer, nestled amongst old photographs and financial documents I didn't understand, was a stack of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to my parents in different handwritings spanning years. They were from lawyers, from banks, referencing transactions. Large sums of money. Money being transferred. To whom? I started reading, slowly at first, then with mounting horror. The letters detailed significant financial support provided by my parents over the years, not just for my sister's education or legitimate needs. These were payments covering debts, bailing her out of increasingly reckless financial situations, covering losses from failed ventures, settling legal issues she'd gotten herself into. The amounts were staggering. Money I never knew they had, money they certainly never spent on themselves, was being poured into her life, not as investment, but as damage control. There were notes from my parents, too, tucked amongst the letters, scribbled frustrations, worried questions about her spending, her choices. Phrases like, "When will it be enough?" and "We can't keep doing this," it painted a picture I'd never seen. My sister, the golden child, was not just privileged, she was a drain, a constant source of financial anxiety for my parents. She wasn't the effortless success she pretended to be. She was a liability they repeatedly rescued, quietly, secretively. This wasn't just a midpoint shift in the plot, it was a seismic shift in my understanding of my family, my parents, and especially my sister. The effortless grace she projected was a facade, masking a history of dependency and perhaps deceit. Armed with this knowledge, the current situation became unbearable. Her performance reached a fever pitch in the days leading up to the will reading. She spoke to the lawyers daily, micromanaging, ensuring everything was in order, her order. She began giving away small items from the house to friends, things she deemed insignificant, but that were heirlooms, saying things like, "Oh, we won't need this old thing in the new layout." She planned a large memorial party for the week after the reading, clearly intended as a celebration of her inheritance and new status. She even suggested, with a sweet, condescending smile, that perhaps I could find a nice, smaller apartment downtown. The estate was simply too large for one person to manage alone. The subtext was clear. I wouldn't be staying. All this, while the hidden letters burned a hole in my mind. I saw the years of quiet sacrifice my parents had made, covering for her, enabling her, while she presented herself as the picture of success, all while subtly belittling my own, hard-won independence. Everything she did felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of the parents she was supposedly mourning. Hope dwindled. How could I possibly stand against this? She had the family convinced. She had the legal team wrapped around her finger. She had the confidence of someone who believed destiny, and the will was on her side. I felt utterly alone, facing a wave of entitlement and manipulation that threatened to drown me. The weight of the past, the present injustice, the certainty of her victory. It pressed down until breathing felt difficult. But the knowledge from the letters, the stark reality of my sister's history of financial drain, planted a stubborn seed of defiance. My parents weren't naive. They couldn't have been. Not after years of bailing her out. Did they ever talk about this with the lawyers? Did they make provisions? Or were they simply too tired, too caught in the cycle? I didn't know. What I did know was that I couldn't let her win like this, not just the inheritance, but the narrative. She couldn't be allowed to paint herself as the deserving heir while wiping away the truth of her actions and my parents' quiet struggles because of them. A quiet resolve hardened within me. It wasn't born of greed, but of a fierce, protective instinct for the memory of my parents, flawed as they were, and a sudden, urgent need for justice, or at least, truth. I stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like a guardian. I didn't know what the will said, didn't dare to hope it would favor me. But I decided, then and there, sitting alone in my father's study with the weight of his secrets, that I would face whatever came with my head held high. I wouldn't cower, wouldn't accept her crumbs, wouldn't let her rewrite our history unchallenged. I would be present, I would listen, and I would, for the first time, stand firm on the ground I had earned, even if it wasn't this hallowed ground of the estate. And so, here we are. The lawyer clears his throat again. The air crackles with anticipation. My sister watches me, that knowing, pitying smile firmly in place. She thinks she knows exactly what's coming. A few polite bequests to cousins, maybe a modest sum for me, just enough to keep the charity case quiet, and then, the vast majority, the estate, the fortune, all hers. I can see it in her eyes, the certainty, the smugness. It's not just about wealth for her. It's about vindication. about proving she was always the chosen one, the superior one. The lawyer begins to read, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Standard clauses about executors, debts, funeral expenses. My sister nods along, impatient to get to the main event. He reads a few small monetary gifts to distant relatives. Her foot taps lightly under the table. Then he pauses, adjusts his spectacles, and turns the page. The atmosphere in the room tightens, anticipation building. He looks directly at my sister, then at me, then back at the document. My sister gives me that look, the one that says, "Prepare yourself for disappointment, this is it." The moment of truth. The lawyer reads, slowly, deliberately. To my daughter, he pauses, looking at my sister. Caroline Elizabeth. Her breath catches slightly, a flicker of pure anticipation. I leave the sum of $100,000. The room holds its breath. Caroline's smile falters, just for a fraction of a second. 100,000? That's nothing, in the context of my parents' wealth, of this estate. It's a pittance. Her eyes narrow, her posture stiffening. She's clearly confused, expecting millions, the house, everything. The lawyer continues, his voice unwavering. To my daughter. He turns his gaze to me, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting perhaps 50,000, maybe 20, a gesture of goodwill. Sarah and I leave. He pauses, and the silence stretches, agonizingly. My sister is staring at him now, her earlier smugness evaporating, replaced by a flicker of alarm. I brace myself for the small number, the final confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. The lawyer reads the words, and they hit the room like a physical force. The entirety of my residual estate, including all real property, financial assets, and personal belongings not otherwise specifically bequeathed herein. My mind struggles to process. The entirety? All of it? My sister's gasp is sharp, audible. Her face, moments ago flushed with anticipated triumph, drains of all color.
Pale.
Stark white. The smirk is gone, replaced by a look of utter shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. Her eyes dart from the lawyer to me, wide, disbelieving. "What?" she whispers, the word thin and reedy. The lawyer continues, reading clauses about managing the estate, transferring titles, detailing the assets. He lists properties, investments, accounts. The numbers blur into an incomprehensible magnitude. It's all mine. The house, the land, the investments, everything. I sit there, stunned, a strange calm washing over me amidst the internal chaos. It's not triumph I feel, not yet. It's shock, and a profound, aching sadness. The twist, the true blindsiding blow for my sister, came not just in the fact that I inherited everything, but in the specific language that followed. The lawyer read a separate section, an addendum, clear and unequivocal, written in my father's hand and attached with a formal note from their solicitor confirming it reflected their joint wishes. It detailed the history of my sister's financial troubles, not in accusatory terms, but as a statement of fact. It listed the significant sums they had paid out over the years on her behalf, the repeated instances of needing to intervene. It spoke of their love for her, but also of their deep concern about her inability to manage her finances responsibly. And then came the words that cut her to the quick, the reason why everything was left to me. It stated that while they had always provided for Caroline, they had come to the difficult conclusion that leaving her further significant wealth would not be in her best interest and, perhaps, would even enable further destructive behavior. It specified that the large sum left to her was intended as a final provision, a safety net, but that the bulk of the estate needed to be managed by someone they trusted to be financially prudent and stable, someone who had demonstrated the ability to build a life with limited resources and understand the value of careful stewardship. It named me explicitly as that person. It wasn't just that I got the money, it was why. The will didn't just disinherit her from the majority, it laid bare, for everyone in that room to hear, the secret history of her financial dependency and their lack of faith in her judgment. She was blindsided not just by the outcome, but by the public, undeniable exposure of the carefully constructed facade of her life. Her face wasn't just pale, it was etched with humiliation and fury. I hadn't just won. I had, without lifting a finger, become the vessel through which their final, devastating judgment upon her financial character was delivered. The charity case was deemed more responsible, more trustworthy, more capable of handling their legacy than the golden child who had always taken and never seemed able to hold onto anything. The silence that followed the lawyer's final words was deafening. Caroline stared, her eyes wide and wild, like a cornered animal. The color was returning to her face now, not pallor, but a deep, angry red. She didn't scream, not immediately. There was a terrible stillness about her. Then, she lunged from her chair, overturning it with a crash. "This is impossible," she shrieked, her voice raw and cracking. "You can't do this. You were always weak. She manipulated you." She pointed a trembling finger at me, accusation blazing in her eyes. The lawyer calmly picked up the overturned chair. "Miss Caroline," he said, his voice flat, "the will is clear. And as the addendum states, your parents provided extensive documentation supporting their reasoning regarding your financial history." He gestured towards a thick binder on the table, presumably containing the letters and records I had found and more. She stumbled back as if struck, her face a mask of pure venom. She couldn't deny it. The evidence was there, meticulously compiled. Her carefully guarded secret, the truth behind her facade, was exposed. She didn't stay. She didn't say another word to me. She grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room, the front door slamming shut moments later, the sound echoing through the silent house like a gunshot. The remaining relatives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The lawyer packed up his papers, his demeanor professional and detached, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the heart of a family. I remained seated. The weight of the documents, the weight of the estate, the weight of my parents' final message, settling upon me. It wasn't the triumphant moment I might have imagined in some dark corner of my mind. It was heavy, complex. There was vindication, yes, a deep, quiet satisfaction that their final assessment hadn't aligned with my sister's cruel narrative of me being the charity case, the incapable one. But there was also immense sadness. Sadness for the fractured family, for the sister who is now gone, perhaps irrevocably. Sadness for my parents, for the years of quiet struggle and worry they had endured because of her. The inheritance wasn't a lottery win. It was a responsibility, a legacy burdened by years of hidden pain and disappointment. I looked around the room, at the grand furniture, the artwork, the symbols of a life I was now meant to inhabit. It felt unfamiliar, daunting. My simple desires for stability and a small patch of earth suddenly felt quaint. I had been given an entire world, but it came with a heavy price, purchased with secrets and shattered relationships. Walking out of the estate that day, not as a visitor, but as the owner, felt surreal. The air outside was crisp, the sky a clear, cold blue. The house stood silent behind me, a monument to a complicated past and an uncertain future. I wasn't the charity case anymore. I was the steward, the keeper of a legacy I hadn't sought, earned through a life lived outside the gilded cage, a life that, ironically, had prepared me for the burden my sister's privileged one had not. The victory felt hollow and full at the same time, a bittersweet testament to the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface of even the most perfect-seeming lives. The estate wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was a story, and mine had just begun. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.